as me and Olivier already spoke before you guys all arrived, I'm quite new to speaking. It's actually kind of my third event that I'm speaking, so cut me some slack, please. And thank you very much for being here. I think one of the things as a data professional, and we all working in data and IT, makes us very special, I think, is that we always have to keep on learning, and that is also the reason why you are all here. So big shout out to yourself before we get started. And my session is called Unlocking the Power of Custom Connectors in Power BI. So I'll be talking about custom connectors. And before we get started, it is good to know who I am, and why I think I have the experience to teach and talk about this subject. And I want to do it in a little bit of a kind of a story. So my name is Floris, you'll probably now know, and I'm from Eindhoven. So I'm Dutch, so you probably hear a little bit of my accent. And actually, I never really studied anything related to data or IT. I studied international business, and there was an opportunity in my program to do something with data, and I deliberately chose not to because I thought, oh, I'm not like that. It's too difficult for me. But in my international business education, I had to do a lot of internships. And so I went to Amsterdam, I worked there, I went to Bangalore, did a management traineeship in India. And then from there, I moved to Ireland to do my minor in Irish business. And if you have that opportunity, you have also the opportunity to go into the business world, but also take a step back and kind of reflect on, okay, what is going well, what is not going well, and how can I make myself better? And there was kind of a very deliberate moment that I got into Power BI. And that is, I had to get my evening groceries, and I was walking to Aldi in Sligo in Ireland, and I was on the phone with my dad, and he was telling me that he went to some Microsoft Power Platform Day. And he was telling me, maybe there's this program for you called Power BI, maybe you will like it. And I remember exactly which spot I was there in Sligo. I looked it up on my phone, Power BI, and I thought this is way too complicated. I'm never going to master this. So I thought, fine, I'll just carry on to the supermarket. But that same evening, I bought a course on Power BI because I thought, yeah, if other people can learn it, I can also learn it, because I'm not that much different than other people. So since that day, it was 3 years ago, there hasn't been a day that I haven't used Power BI. And I started to love it that much that I started my own company using Power BI to help Dutch companies with Power BI. So it's really just Power BI consulting and developing dashboards. So in that process, I've used a lot of the Power Platform, SharePoint, Power Automate. But in that process of making dashboards for Dutch companies, I always got kind of one question, and it was, oh, we have this system. Can it be in Power BI? We have this system. It was always either Odoo, either HubSpot, Exact, or Numbers. And those are in the Netherlands used a lot. And my answer was always no, because I just didn't know. But I saw that other companies knew how to do it because they had all these pages with connectors that they have built for Power BI. So I was thinking, why is there nothing that I can find on how to make it? And how can I solve this question on how to do it? So I was thinking, I'm just going to reverse engineer it and find it out myself. And if I know it, I'm going to be the one that has to evangelize everyone to make custom connectors. So I started to brainstorm a little bit with ChatGPT on how can we do it. So he was my brainstorm partner in this. And eventually it worked. And that was a year ago. And now I would say I know a fair bunch about custom connectors. So I see it as my personal mission to tell you all about custom connectors. So I'm not the only one who has this kind of superpower, but we all have. And the connectors that I've built are for all the logos you see. So it's for Odoo, Google Ads, HubSpot, Numbers, Exact, and Team Leader Focus. And the fun thing about these ones is that they all work a little bit in a different way. So the authentication for the Odoo API that you have to use is different than the one for HubSpot. The way you query the data for Google Ads is way different than for the other ones. And also, most of them use the REST API, but then you have Numbers, which is a very modern system, but still uses the SOAP API. So it's very diverse, but also that's what keeps it kind of fun. So that's a little bit about who I am. So I hope I convinced you all to listen. So please stay. But I said, yeah, I'm a BI consultant, so I love KPIs. And I love Power BI. So we have to make some KPIs. And when is this presentation now successful for me? That is if after this presentation, I have convinced you all of these 3 learning goals. So you'll be able to understand what custom connectors are in Power BI. So when you are, I don't know, after this, having a coffee with your significant other, or tomorrow at the coffee machine at work, you'll be able to tell, yeah, I went to a great presentation about custom connectors, and you will also be able to tell what they are. And also you will know how to build it, because those are two completely different things. So you also know what tools are there, and you're able to be able to build one. So you will really be a significant person at work because you have this knowledge that no one has. So if I can achieve this, then it has been a great success for me. But before we get started with all the technical knowledge of this, there must be a reason why you are here today. And that is what I want to know. So for which system do you want to build a custom connector? And I want you all to go to Mentimeter, menti.com on your phone and use this code, and then fill in the system that you are thinking, hey, I'm here because I want to build an integration for this system. So it could be Odo, HubSpot. So I'll give you 2-3 minutes to put it in there, because then also I can immediately use that feedback when I'm talking and say, okay, maybe you said Odo, then you could think about this identification method. So please feel free to put it in now. I'll give 2-3 minutes. Strava, okay? So we have someone that likes running here. Spotify. Auto exact. Cool. Snel start. For the one for Snel start, I've actually looked into it myself, and their API documentation is quite complicated if you compare it to other ones. Interesting. Well, everyone has all have its different ones, not because if so one is 2 times, it goes bigger. Okay. No, for now, just curious. Okay. That is also great. Real cube. I haven't used that one. Okay, I'll give 10 more seconds and then I'm gonna carry on. Yeah, finished. Okay, interesting selection. Everyone all having different ones. I think the one for Spotify is nice. To make your own Spotify rep, that will be actually be quite cool for a project. Yeah, then on to the next slide. So what will I be talking about? Now, very easy. First, we're going to define it. So what are custom connectors? So kind of a general definition, my definition, which is a little bit cooler in my opinion. Then why are they relevant? So what kind of specific business problem they solve? And I'll give also some stories from my personal experience. Then I'll give a few public APIs that you could also think about to integrate. Then I'll talk a little bit, okay, what tools are needed? And if we build a connector, what files are they made up for, and what is actually every file doing? Then the structure of our data querying file, which we have to upload eventually into Power BI. And then we're going to roll up our sleeves and metaphorically get our hands dirty. And we're going to do a small demo in which we're going to look for the data that gives the weather of the beautiful city of Eindhoven with a custom connector. And then I have also created a small business case, which I've actually had one time that I had to really do it for a company. And then also I'm going to talk, okay, how does this work in Power BI Service? Because this presentation is heavily focused on Power BI Desktop, but Power BI Service is a very, very different animal. So how do we get also the scheduled refreshes? Because if we don't have that, what is then really the purpose of it and the benefit? Then I'll talk a little bit about the advantages and challenges of making this. And then also I'll give you some tips that I've made when I reflect on my process of building custom connectors. So what would I have liked to know a year ago, so that you can start with a head start. And then of course a Q&A. So let's get started with what are custom connectors. So really, really definition, textbook style. So custom connectors are a bridge between Power BI and external tools such as APIs. and tools. So Exact, HubSpot, Odo, Strava, for example. So if you see on that right-hand visualization, unfortunately, it's not a Power BI visualization. That would have made it even better. But it doesn't take the data and go straight down. No, it goes in kind of an angled way, because in a custom connector, not only you can get data, you can also add some filtering. So you can also make some parameters that your end user is able to say, no, I only want for the last 6 months. I only want for this specific country. So in that way, you can really customize it. And then in that way, you can get the data to Power BI. So that is also just why they exist and what problem they solve. I'm not going to make it more complicated, because we shouldn't overcomplicate things that are not needed to be overcomplicated. So some practical examples, of course, is HubSpot, Numbers, Strava, but actually all the other ones that you all listed in the Mentimeter. And then with kind of my lingo, how I would say it, I would say custom connectors empower companies to bring all data they need directly into Power BI for visualization. And that is, of course, I say empower because I'm a BI consultant, so I have to also sell it. So I have to make it sound a bit better and a bit more cooler than it is. So why are they then relevant? So they give access to hidden data and flexibility. So a very practical thing of that is, let's say some of you may have used Salesforce. And in Salesforce, there is built-in analytics. So you can make some graphs, and you can make a line chart, a pie chart. But you want to go a little bit of step further. So you want to extract data. And of course, for Salesforce, there's a built-in integration in Power BI. But let's say for Odo, it's not there. And for HubSpot also not there. And you can also very practically, I follow a lot of HubSpot people on LinkedIn, of course, because of course I need to also sell my connector. So I kind of have to get connected with them. And I see them a lot of times complaining, okay, to each other, okay, in HubSpot Build Analytics, how can we do this? How can we make a custom time period? How can we make our dashboards a little bit nicer, a little bit more flexible? You can't. You have to extract the raw data, get it in Power BI, and then you can just leverage all the capabilities of Power BI, all the AI visuals, the AI machine learning models you can build with Power BI. Yeah, then you can leverage that flexibility. Another one is automation and cost saving. And the reason for is, in this way, you can automate that process. Let's say for HubSpot, yes, you can do an export to CSV, and then that CSV, you put it in Excel and you combine it. Yeah, that's just wasting time. And a good example of this, when I was doing my graduation internship at GDE Peets, we had this system which we had, and we could see how was the whole coffee segment performing in one of the largest European retailer in their stores. Now, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to say the name, but we could extract the data from their system, and then that would be extracted into CSV files, into Excel, and then luckily some other intern did that, and then it would be given to me and I would visualize it. But that was taking a lot of steps. They were completely unnecessary. But if we have just built a custom connector, and I already had the knowledge at the time, this process could be so much easier. And you can just save so much time with that. And another thing is the future proof of this, future proofness. And the reason for why I say this is, as a BI consultant, I want to advise companies in building a data-driven strategy, data-driven culture inside the company. That only works if we make Power BI a single source of truth. If we get all Power BI data, all data into Power BI. Let's say we have 10 data sources and we get 9 of them in Power BI, and we have a beautiful dashboard. So we say, yeah, but for number 10, yeah, we can't extract it. You have to look in HubSpot Build Analytics. Yeah, you're building a house with a foundation that's rotten then, because you can't build on that, a culture of data-drivenness on that. So that is just why they are so relevant. So that's why I've got into this. So before we start into building, I want you to know, okay, what are some more public APIs that maybe you haven't thought about? That is, let's say, the European data portal. Now, I've used the one from my municipality because I want to see what kind of, how many electronic charging ports for cars were here. Let's say for another company, I had used actually the Aiden APIs to get the transactions. So there are a lot of more options that you could even think about. So almost the nice thing about this custom connectors, if you notice after this, is you can make your Power BI report as crazy as you want. You can benchmark it with all information that you can find and that's out there online, because you know how to build this. And no matter what authentication method there is, you can integrate it. Now, enough talking about principles and then trying to make it sound very nice. How are we going to build it? We're not going to build it in Power BI. We're going to build it in Visual Studio Code. And there we're going to use the Power Query SDK. Now, Visual Studio Code, think you all are quite technical. For me, for example, when I looked first time into how to build this in Visual Studio Code, it was almost a kind of a deterrent for me. But of course, necessity, then you become always flexible. Now, the Power Query SDK, that's kind of a toolkit developed by Microsoft itself, actually, to build custom connectors. And what it does, it helps you with writing the M code in which it is written. And also it helps you a little bit with the identification. Because of course, in Power Query, you might think, oh, in Power Query, we can already do a lot. We can already call APIs there. But then, yeah, that works if you have a simple authentication. I'll go into authentication a little bit later of this session. But if you have just an API key, yeah, then it works perfectly fine. But if you have authentication too, hey, then it's going to get a little bit more complicated. Then you have to store refresh tokens and you have to store your access token. Then you need a little bit more coding. So then you really need the Power Query SDK. Now, also, they claim that it helps with faster debugging. I'm personally not really convinced by that. So that's the nuance I would like to give, because sometimes they give you some lines that say that this is wrong, but then it still works. So even if you start a project, that's in the demo, I will show you also, it will say some red lines, but then, yeah, that is created by the SDK, and so it still works. But I'll also show you where we can download this. But before we get into it, if you make a custom connector, it's made out of a certain structure, a certain file structure, and it is good to know what is there, because even though we see a lot, you can also see my mouse, you see this .pq file, and that is actually the main the main file where we're going to do all the code writing, and that is where the main kind of logic is. So that is also when I write one, I'm only focused on that one. That is where I do all my stuff. Now, then we have our project. That is where you can store some metadata. I personally never added anything there because it's not really needed. And at the same for the .query.pq file below that, that is there to do some testing and validating. Personally, what I like to do sometimes is I just like to check it and copy paste it into Power Query if it's the easy one and check it there. Or I just like to make it step by step and then upload it into Power BI, check it, and then do another step. Just like scientific research that you can always only change one variable at a time. Now, then you have a lot of images, and that is actually the image that you see in the get data view. So I'll show you that later. And this is kind of, here you see the default image. Now, for example, what I like to do here, the images, you can put whatever you want. I like to put my company logo always. But yeah, let's say, I don't know, you make this connector and you let someone white label it. Now, then you can put their logo, or you say it's an exact connector. Now, then you put the exact logo there to make it for your colleagues a bit easier. And then if you have your .rest file, that is the localized UI string. Now, I never really do anything there. And we're also not going to do anything there. We're just going to be in the .pq file. Now, what is then happening in that mysterious .pq file? This is happening in a mysterious .pq file. Now, this is a custom connector that I've built, and with this one, we can see the top headlines of the news in the US. Now, what do we see here? We see a lot of blocks, and the reason why is because they're really just separate elements that we have. So we have here kind of a section opening and a version. And here we have, you probably recognize this let and this in statement, because that is what you also do in your advanced editor in Power Query. Now, you see here, first I define the URL. Now, I already add some filtering, so I put US, and then I was already talking about an API key. You add that after that. Now, then we're going to call it, and then we have to transform it into a table. So this is nothing too complicated, but this is just to show, okay, how do we ask for data in a custom connector? So just, if I just copy paste in Power Query, it would also work. But we also have to think about our not technical users. So I don't know, Karen from HR that also wants to build a dashboard and also wants to have data. Yeah, she also needs to be able to use it. So we're not going to give her this whole script and say, I'll just put it in Power Query. Then custom connector is a bit easier. Now, then we have this one, the where it says anonymous. Now, this is when also when in Power Query you ask do an API request, you have always these types of authentication. You can say, you say anonymous, you say basic. Now, that is this. We say no, just anonymous, and then here we have this section, your publish. Now, this is kind of your UI elements. So that is the beta version, and what is the name which people can find it in your get data view, where is it kind of categorized that is there, so that also, if I show you, will become a little bit more clear. And here we have our images. So that is just kind of the structure of this. And now before we start with the demo, I want to talk a little bit about authentication, because we're going to work with APIs, and a lot of the systems that you all put in the Mentimeter require a lot of authentication. So of course you have your basic one, you have your API key, simplest but limited security. So it is good for like news API, for like open weather API, I don't know, for maybe for getting the exchange rates, which maybe we're gonna do something with, just who knows. And then you have also your basic authentication. So for the person that said Odo, with Odo, you have basic authentication that you have to use. So in the headers of your API request in the custom connector, you have to send your username and password to authenticate what you want to get. Now, that is rarely used. So only for Odo, I've only encountered it for Odo. So it was a very rare case. But then we have also authentication 2.0, and that is kind of the most difficult one. So some of you have already know what I'm talking about, but maybe for some it's completely new. So I will just tell it in kind of a metaphor that made it very easy for me. It takes a little bit long. It's like 5 minute long metaphor almost, but for me it made it super easy because it's an interesting process with a lot of small steps. But the fun about authentication 2 is that it is a standardized process. So I only had to build it once. So I built it one time. The first time was for Exact Online. And then I could also use it for HubSpot. I just copy paste it into my connector for HubSpot. I change the endpoints. I get a new client and secret ID, and it works. I don't have to do everything all over again because it's standardized. So how does authentication work, and how would I explain it? I would explain it like you go on a holiday, and let's say you go to holiday of your lifetime, you go to Eindhoven. And you have to check in at your hotel room, and you've already kind of previously booked your hotel, and your hotel is your metaphorical system that you want to get access to. So you go to the hotel and you go to the receptionist, and she asks you, hey, do you have any code that you have? And say, yeah, I have my booking ID and I have an OTP code. So that is your client and your secret ID that you put in your header request because you're requesting access to the hotel. Now, then the receptionist asks you, oh, but we have access to you can get access to a few things that that are included. You can get access to your room, to the gym, to the casino, and to the bar. And you say, yeah, fine, I want access to all four because I paid for all four. So in the request, the receptionist is going to add that all in the scope of the request. Just like with the OAuth request, you also have to add everything in the scope. Now, you say, okay, fine. And then in that request, you still have to give your password also to the receptionist because she has to see that it's you. Because you also have to give your username and password. So there's a lot of checking back and forward, and also making sure that you only get access to the right things that are only kind of entitled to you. Now, then you get one of these beautiful hotel cards. This is not a hotel card actually. It's a plastic card. You get one of these plastic access cards. And she says, okay, here you have an access token that is stored on this one, and it's only valid for 5 minutes. So you say, okay, fine, I'll go to my hotel room very quickly, and you kind of run there, and then you reach you have number 28, but you reach number 38. So you try to check it, it doesn't work. And then you see, oh, it's already past 6 minutes. So I have to go back to the receptionist, and you say, oh, do we have to go all over the whole process again? Because you knew the whole process to get in took you 10 minutes. And she says, no, actually what I've done for you, I've not only put on here an access card token, I've also put a refresh token. And with that refresh token, you can get an access token without doing any extra work. So once you get in, you will only have access to exactly what you asked to and exactly what you're entitled to. And you don't have to authenticate again. And that is what makes authentication so nice, in my opinion, and also why it is so secure. So I hope that made it a little bit clear. For me, I definitely did. It is actually a friend of mine told me that studies IT because I was telling him that I was very much struggling with this, and he said, "Let me just explain it to you." So what it does, it protects sensitive data and it ensures that you only can access what you're entitled to. And this is really used by larger enterprise APIs, so like HubSpot, Google, and like Microsoft. And also you actually use it in your day-to-day life without knowing. So let's say you download a mobile game and it says you want to make a new account. So you can say, I want to make a new account, but then you have to go to all these tedious steps to make a new account. But below that, it says, but you can also just log in with Facebook. And you say, I want to log in with Facebook, and you have to log in with your Facebook account, and you're thinking, do they get access to my whole Facebook account now? No, they do an OAuth request to Facebook to only get access to your username, email address, and profile picture. So in that way, actually, you use it in your day-to-day life. And that is, since I know this, it's kind of cool how many times you see it. Now, enough talking. I love talking and hearing myself, but there's nothing better than just getting our hands dirty and start with a demo. So I will go into Visual Studio Code, and we're just gonna start with a small demo. So now my Visual Studio Code is visible. So before we get started, we have to install, of course, the Power Query SDK. So where can we do that? We go to extensions here, and then we can install this one. So this is the Power Query SDK. It's developed by Microsoft. So in my opinion, it is kind of trustworthy. And what you can see here, it is made to make extension projects for custom connectors. So the sole purpose of this is to make what we're going to make. So once we have installed it, we can open a new folder, and I'll go to, I'll store it on my desktop in my data mines folder. And I will call this, because what we're going to do first is we're going to do the weather of Eindhoven. So I'll call this just open weather. Now select the folder. Now we still have nothing. So what do we do now? We go here, you see Power Query SDK, and we say, okay, we're going to create a new extension project. So we have to give that a name. I also will name that open weather. And immediately we get all these things. Now, we're not going to be, for this one, we're not going to be bothered with this part. We're only really going to focus on this getting data part. Now, so we can get rid of this one and of this one. Now, and I'll make this a little bit more open. So what we have to do here is we have to define our URL to get data of the weather of Eindhoven. We have to get that from the web, and then we have to make it into a JSON document. So we have to parse the JSON, and then we have to make it into a table, and then we're gonna build this and put it into Power BI and see that it works. And before that, we're also gonna validate it in Power Query. So let's just get started. So I'll say, okay, first we're gonna define our URL. Actually, I'll make it a bit bigger because I think it's not that visible. So it should be a little bit more readable. Go to my next line, and now, of course, I name it URL. I open it with these quotation marks, if that's the right word in English. And then, of course, I am going to paste in the URL. So what we see here is we see the URL for the open weather map, and you can already see I already added some filtering. And that is, we can see here the latitude and the longitude, and we need an app ID, so that is an API key. So for this one, they use a little bit of a different naming to it. Now, and of course, now we only use one endpoint, but we can also call multiple endpoints or multiple locations with this one. For this one, actually, have done that once. It was a because you can maybe think, okay, we're going to call the open weather. Is it that relevant for business contact? Yes, actually it is. There was a project for a large NGO, and they had projects all over Africa. And actually, one of the complaints they got from people working there on their project is, hey, we can't work. It's way too hot out here. And it's, of course, very easy to say from an office in the Netherlands, looking outside here, it's 10 degrees, thinking, you can just work, right? It's 10 degrees and it's not that hot. So they actually wanted a map that they could hover over. And of course, they had some other variables and other things that they wanted to see. But one of them was in a custom tooltip to see, okay, what is the weather? If you hover over a place, what is the weather? So I had to make a custom connector with a lot of locations. So that is also even possible. So if you were doubting about the relevancy of this, then I hope I convinced you. So now we have to call the URL. So we'll call URL, go to the next line. So I'm gonna, of course, name this raw response. Now, the web.content. And I'm gonna reference back to the previously defined URL. Now I go to my next line. And then, of course, we have to parse the JSON. So we call it JSON response, JSON document, and then we reference back to that raw response. Raw response. Oh, my spelling mistake here. That's my dyslexia coming through. So, and now, of course, we have to do the one most important thing, and that is make it into a table. So I'll call it actually, I'll call it table. Why not? So we have to make a table from the rows that we have, and then the field names, we have to use that for the record. So I'll go in the table from rows. That is actually not the function that I need. I'm recognizing it, doing something wrong. This one, of course, I open this one, and then I'm going to use these curly brackets, and there I'm going to put in the record to list function. I reference back to my JSON response. Close this one, comma, record dot field names. And there also I reference back to my JSON response. Now, one last thing to do, and that is to name this table one here. Now, and then you're probably thinking, how can we then know before going through all the steps of checking if this custom connector all works with the UI elements? Now, we can just go into Power BI. I go into get, no, not to get data, actually. I go to transform. And get a blank query, advanced editor, and I put it in there. Now we see it works. Now, what we're now going to do is we're going to close this actually. Now we say we don't want to save it. Now, then we're going to run a build task, even though we see these errors, but this is what the SDK generated, so it will tolerate that. So we do run a build task, and then we do make PQX. Sometimes I doubt if it's an O or an X. Now, and we're going to see it's going to do a lot of things. And now actually, it also magically made this bin folder. And then in this bin folder, we now have a .mas file. And that is what we need. That is a custom connector. So what we're then going to do is we can go into the one that we just created. So into this folder, go to the bin. And there we see this magical mas file. And what we then have to do is This is going to sound a bit strange, but what you have to do is in your documents folder, don't ask me why it should be there. That is just the way how Power BI wants it. You have to make a folder called Power BI Desktop, and you have to write it in the exact way as this. So the capitalization needs to be exactly like this. And then in that folder, you need to make one called custom connectors with the exact capitalization of like this. Now, you're gonna drag it into there. And then if you had Power BI open, you have to, of course, close it. But I already closed it. You have to open Power BI again. And then we're almost there. There's one setting that we have to change, otherwise it's also not showing. So we go into options. It's coming. And then in options, we go to security. And then you see here data extensions. Now, we have to put it on not recommended. Now, of course, it says not recommended, but we have to, otherwise it doesn't recognize it. But now if we do this, we close Power BI again. Now it was already on not recommended, and we open Power BI again. But now if I go here to get data, I go to the other categories because we saw we put in other. Now, and we should now see this one, open weather beta custom. Now you can see the other ones that I've previously built. So my test one, of course, because before the session I had to test if it actually works. And now we can connect to this. Now asked here also, do you want to connect with a third-party server? And what is, before we go further, is quite interesting. If you press this one, you go to a certain URL. Now you can use it quite strategically because that is URL that is defined here. So what you, for example, you can also do is you can link that to a OneDrive where you have like an explanation video or like a YouTube video that you put on private. So you can just explain what it is or how it works. So you can use it to your advantage. I sometimes pull it to just to my website. Not sure if that is the most optimal way to use it, but I do. Then you press continue. Now it says here anonymous, we want to connect, and we get this. So now we can see what is the weather on where I am currently. Now it is 291 degrees Kelvin. So of course we have to do minus 273. So I'm not melting, luckily. So and that is actually how we build a custom connector, a very basic one. Now, and of course, with this basic connector, you're probably thinking, why do we not do it in Power Query? It is because it is for a non-technical user. This is way easier. So now we're actually gonna do this in a practical context. So I've built a small case. I'm gonna show my screen again. So I built a practical case, and it is based on something that I've actually built at GDE Pete's. So background for this one is we're working for the company called Nordic Retail Solutions, and it operates in Denmark. And all the records of their sales are, of course, in Danish krona. Now, however, the financial reporting and strategic decision-making, for the financial reporting and strategic decision-making, the headquarters is located in the Netherlands. It's located in Amsterdam. So all the amounts have to be in euros. Now, that is because that it's not only Nordic Retail Solutions, but you also have Balkan Retail Solutions. You have every place in the world has its own retail solutions company. So yeah, and it's all managed centrally in the Netherlands. So there needs to be a way that we can dynamically get the exchange rates to a custom connector. And we also want to build a way with a parameter that we can say, now, I don't only want to say, okay, a euro is one, but what if I want to say, okay, a Danish krona is one, and then I want to be the exchange rates based on that. Now, currently the company does it with a static exchange rate, and I think I don't have to explain further that that is not really the best way to do it. So we have to find a solution for that. So we're going to build a custom connector to get the exchange rate, and then we're going to change that in the Power BI report. So let's get back to Visual Studio Code. Oh, my throat's getting dry. So I'm gonna make a new folder, not in my downloads, of course, but in data mines. Now I call this Nordic, what shall I call it? Reporting. Nordic reporting. That sounds great. Now, and that is also how I'm gonna name the extension project. Because I have to go, don't have to go there. I'm gonna press here, make a new extension project. So Nordic reporting. Now, again, we get all this. I'll make it a bit larger so it's more visible. Now, and we're gonna now start again from here. So we're not gonna be bothered with this bottom part, but we're gonna work on this part. So before we get started, we have to think about a few things. So I said we are gonna, of course, use some exchange rate API, but also we want to make that base currency on which you're gonna call the API. We want to make that with a parameter so we can choose ourselves what we want. So we also think, okay, then we have to make an additional kind of function that we have to write and we have to reference to it. So that's what we're going to do. And we still need to have that calling and then parsing the JSON. And also we're then going to look and test it. And then of course we're going to do something extra. So let's get started. I'm going to get rid of this part because we don't need that. And what I'm actually going to start with is this top part. So I'm going to get rid of this. Now, and knowing already from what I have to write, I'll start from top and I'll just go to bottom. I'll start with value replace type. And in here, I'm going to take two things because we're going to make Nordic reporting function and Nordic reporting type. So this will be now get a red line, but it will solve eventually over time because the function which I'm going to put in here is the data calling function, which we're going to say in which we're going to call the API, and Nordic retail type. That is the parameter in which people have to put that currency which they want. So Nordic reporting function, and then space Nordic reporting type. Yes, exactly. Now I have to do this one. Now we are going to start with that Nordic reporting function. So Nordic reporting function. Now, what do we need is we need from the end user the base currency because we're going to add that after the API. So base currency. You'll currently not know what I'm talking about, the SDK, but you will in a second. Now they have to upload that as a text because that is one thing with custom characters. Sometimes when they get something back, let's say a value or a JSON, or you put something in a parameter, you have to define, of course, what it is. And so maybe for some technical users will be thinking, Floris, that was quite obvious, but as doing this as a non-technical user, that's something that I forget sometimes. Now, table, and then this arrow. So now we go next. And now we are actually going to do a little bit the same thing what we've previously already done. So again, we're going to define the API. So again, I'm going to start with this URL is, there's actually something you will see when you start writing is you actually almost always start with that. And then I am going to copy this URL in. Now, and you see we have this slash, but then we lack something. So that is where we're going to, after that, we're going to reference this base currency. So now add base currency. Now we do that, and to make it a little bit easier actually and not that long, this coding part, I will do the next two steps in one actually. So call and parse JSON. So I'll call it source. is, and I will do the JSON document and the web.content function in one. So JSON document web.contents, and here I will put the URL inside. So that's that. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna check what we're gonna get actually if we put this in, let's say, our browser. So let's say now I put this API in there, and now of course I want to go back from Danish krona to euros, so I'll put EUR. Now we get this response, so we get this type of JSON back, and you can see actually, yeah, this top side I don't really need. I don't really want that, and it is not really for my business case. So I just only want like this whole part with the exchange rate. So we're gonna do something with this conversion underscore rate. So that is what we're gonna do something with. So we have to copy that, and we're gonna paste that in our next line of code. So we go to the next one, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna extract only that part. So I'll call extract exchange rates from exchange. That is a with dyslexia, that looks very good. Yeah, exchange rate from JSON. Now and go. Yeah, and now I'm gonna call that conversion rates. So I'm gonna get those records to a table. So I called record to table, and I think that with writing this M code is always, it's a way of thinking, and if you know that way of thinking, then the logical and what you have to write sounds quite yeah, then it becomes very easy. I think in the beginning, of course, it's you don't know, but eventually, if you know what you want to do, then the functions are actually not that complicated. So we put this one, and now we put that conversion underscore rates. We put this in here because we say, okay, from the source, we only want this part. So we now do one comma, and we're going to do one more manipulation, and that is we're going to rename the columns. Columns, that sounds good. Because what we see is there's not really a header, or there's not like no column name. So it's going to get a very vague or basic one from Power BI, and that for end users not going to be great. So what it's going to do, it's by default, it's going to name this one name because it sees that there's a text, and it's going to name this one value. Now, you want this one to be named currency and this one to be named exchange rate. So we're going to add that function, and then actually we're almost finished. So rename columns, that is, and then table, and then we have to rename column. So table dot rename columns. And what we have to do now is, of course, we have to reference back to this one, and then we have to say, okay, which column do we have to name what? So conversion rates. Now in there we do a comma, and then we have to do these curly brackets, and inside these curly brackets we have to do also another time, and then after that another time, because we're going to do two times two columns. We're going to name two columns differently, so we have to do it two times. So what we have to do here is first have to name, okay, what is the original name? So that is name because it's a text one. Now comma, what do we want to name it? We want to name it exchange, oh, apologies, currency. Now, then we go to this one, and the other one was called value. Value column, we want that to be named exchange rate. Exchange rate. Now, and then we have this one, and now what we have to do here, we're almost there. but not yet. We have to put this one here because we have to reference back to this one. We say, now we almost have it, but we can also see, hey, this is still needing something. So we still have to say for our end user, they still need a place where they can put it in. So they still need some kind of parameter for putting the currency pair. So I'll say we're gonna define the input parameter. And with this input parameter, you will see also what I was talking about, that it's a good SDK, but sometimes there are some limitations that it needs a function that it doesn't really recognize. So what did I call this one? I call this Nordic reporting type. So that is also, of course, what we are going to start with. So we call this Nordic reporting type. Now, it is of a type function. Make it more complicated. Now, of course, again, just like we had previously, base currency as type texts meta. And, oh, not this one. Straight ones, exactly. Now we're almost there. This one, get rid of this one. No, and we're almost there. Only thing is documentation, view, caption. And then after this step, we can actually already put it in Power BI and hopefully solve the business case. Otherwise, we made a spelling mistake somewhere. So we're almost there. Only we have to add as table. Yeah, that was the one I was overlooking. Now we see this one here. So we have now put our input parameters and we reference it back here. And now we're going to be left with a nice clean table. So what I'm going to do, I closed Power BI already. We're going to run a build task, make PQX. It is building it. This is of course empty because we're still looking in the open weather one. Now then I'm going to go to Nordic reporting. And I'm going to drag this one in here. Now, I open Power BI again. I'll do it on my other screen actually, because I can open the case then easily. Yeah. That was the case. Yeah, here we got it. So as you can see, I made a very nice Figma background for Nordic Retail Solutions. And what you can see already is we have all the sales data in Danish krona. Now, what we have to do is we have to get data. Now, it should be called Nordic reporting. So as you can see, it is there because we did it correctly. So we have to connect, continue, and then it's going to ask for our base currency. Our base currency is EUR, so it's euro. Now, and then we have to press connect. So now we get the exchange rates based on euro is 1. Now, then of course we go to transform data, because the one thing we haven't done is we haven't defined the data types, and that can sometimes be RBI can do it automatically, but I personally don't really trust other people than myself, so we have to do it ourselves. So we have to define the data, change the data type, and this one also. Now we can do close and apply, and the model view will then probably already automatically do it because I have that enabled. And you can see now they already established the relationship. So now the only thing we have to do is we have to do a sum x calculation, and then we have solved this business case. So now this is the amount in Danish krona. So possibly it's gonna be now, let's say something with 1 to 7 or 7 to 1. So it should be a lot less. So we're gonna create a new measure. Now we're gonna call it total sales in euro. in euro, is it a 0 or an O? No, it's a, let's do EUR because we're also using EUR as a currency pair. So now, then of course, we're going to do some X. We're going to reference back the sales table because that's where we're going to do some X. And then what we're going to do then, of course, is the sales. So sales, and we divide that by the related function, of course, and then the exchange rate. So now we have to close it. And now hopefully it should be, let's say, with my knowledge about it, I would say it would guess around 400K, 311.88K euros. So now this is what we have done. And now the nice thing about this custom connector, instead of just us as, let's say, the Danish office having that in our Power Query, we can also send this to our Balkan office, our North American office, and they can just use it very easily like that. So that is how we build two small custom connectors. And of course, we can, this is the start, but we can make it a lot more and more fun. So let's get back to the presentation. So we had a live demo, we had a small case, but then Power BI Service, because now we all focused on Power BI Desktop, but Power BI Service is a completely different animal. And we probably already know that, so that's not real new knowledge that I'm telling, but with custom connectors, they require an on-premises data gateway. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. And one thing you have to make sure is when you install that on-premises data gateway is that you give the gateway access to that Power BI desktop folder that you've created in your documents folder. Because otherwise, you can install the on-premises data gateway and otherwise it doesn't work. And it's because you've made that file new, you have to explicitly give it access. So please, please, please do that. Otherwise, it will take a lot of time. But this is the only thing you have to do with Power BI Server. So just install on-premises data gateway, professional mode. And now let's say you do it on an Azure virtual machine or AWS virtual machine, then it's no issue. You can just have it running. And on AWS, it will not cost you more than 50 euros a month for a very good one. So just do that. And then it will work perfectly fine with Power BI Service. So what are then some challenges and advantages? Because we're already coming close to the end of my talk. So definitely the advantage is flexibility and customization. So if you look on the right side, or let's, for example, on this screen, you see this laptop with this dashboard. Now, this is actually a dashboard that I've built myself with a on top of a custom connector for Exact Online. So the person that said Exact in the Mentimeter, you then probably know how difficult it sometimes can be in Exact to find insights, and then you probably know this is a little bit easier. So that ease of finding insight, that is a big plus, and of course new data sources and time saving. But with everything that is great, there is also some limitations and challenges that we have to be very honest with each other. Now, of course, the API limits. So sometimes you can easily overload it when it's like a smaller system, or if you have a very big company with a large team, everyone going to call it, or if you have multiple dashboards that use the same API, and let's say you have your Power BI premium subscription and you think, yeah, all my 10 dashboards need to be updated 48 times a day just because it's possible. Yeah, then you're gonna run into some issues. Now, one other thing is debugging, because debugging can sometimes be quite difficult because you really have to make it into a scientific experiment and think, oh, I can only do one variable at a time, because the Power Query SDK is good for building, but debugging, there are sometimes some points that can be improved. Now, then technical complexity. I think all of you are very technical, but of course, you really need to know about M code. Of course, what type of APIs are there? Because you need to know, okay, what's the difference between a SOAP API and a REST API? How do I handle that? Now, also the knowledge about OAuth. I hope my story made it very well, very understandable. But yeah, making that in a good way to check it as well, that can be a little bit difficult. So a lot of previous knowledge is required. I would say that maybe the knowledge required 1 year ago was more than now, because a year ago I've used also ChatGPT sometimes to help me a bit, and that time I think it took more time to debug his results than coming up with it myself. But these days he's become quite good with it. Or that could be because I've trained it, but who knows? That maybe that answer will also be somewhere in the middle. So then my tips for success. So if I honestly reflect on my journey of custom connectors, I would say start easy. Now, that of course start is it, or you're thinking that is obviously quite obvious. But my first one, I wanted to make one for Exact Online with 13 endpoints, and I wanted to make some filtering inside because I thought, yeah, if other people can do it, I can do it myself also. But choose an easy one like the News API, the Open Weather API. Choose one with just an API key, not authentication, because the one I wanted to build also had OAuth. And just start with one table, then go to two, then make a navigation table. So just start and build from there, and choose a well-documented one. Some of them are more difficult than others, and just in the way that they have their API documentation. So I would say also, if you want to start with one that has OAuth 2, start with HubSpot. They have a very well-documented API, and also you can get a developer account in less than 5 minutes, I think. While with some, I think it was Snell Start, which also I saw in the Mentimeter, they have you have to get in contact with them, with a representative of them, and then you can get started with, you get then your token, and it takes a long time. And also their account manager, they will try to get you into a subscription also, so I wouldn't recommend that. But start with an easy one, and also document your steps along the way, because if you're not going to do it, no one is going to do it. You're not going to find anything online about it, because it's a topic that we all like to gatekeep. So note it down and get a good OneNote and make one page dedicated to it. And also when you're writing it, start step by step. It can be tempting to write a very long one and then say, okay, let me just check it, and then you have no idea where it went wrong. So start step by step. And also you, of course, use the advanced editor, as I said. But actually, before you start, check if you have all the tools needed. Check if your endpoint is correct. So use Postman to, Postman is an online, you can use it in your browser, and some of them probably already know, but you can check APIs with that. So you know, okay, does my API key actually work? Like for example, in the preparations for this session, I was making the one to get the data from the weather data from Eindhoven. And in the copying of my API token, I forgot one character. And I was thinking, why is my connection not working? Yeah. So I went to Postman and I checked it and I saw, oh, yeah, my API token is invalid because I missed one character. So do that even before you get started building. Check if you have everything ready. So use Postman for that. Now, and if you are a little bit more and more knowing what you want to do and you know what manipulations you want to do, you can also use the Microsoft documentation for M code, because it's actually quite well written down. Maybe sometimes some little bit technical lingo, but of course you have to get used to it. So that's it. So I hope now after this you're all super inspired to build custom connectors, because I really enjoy it. So if you have any questions, please fire away.